Hello everybody and welcome back to our Game Engines class. In this unit, we are going to learn about cameras, lights, and shadows in Ogre 3D. We already worked our way up to creating 3D scenes with the use of Ogre. We learned how to effectively use the scene graph as a means for us in Ogre 3D to be able to make relationships between objects that are in the scene and effectively all the actors that we will place in, and to be able to perform transformations and any sort of geometric interpretations that we need in terms of the hierarchies of these actors that may have relationships with each other. So we already learned how to create those complex scenes, but without light and shadow, our scene wouldn't be complete. In fact, if you remember from the very first section that we started working with Unreal, with the Ogre 3D, we effectively wouldn't be able to see anything, so we plopped a light in the scene. I didn't really talk about how this light interacts with the objects, but without putting that light actor in, our scene would basically render dark, and we won't be able to see any of the nodes that were created and any of the meshes that we placed in. So what we will do in this unit is to learn about these visual components that are not necessarily objects in a sense that we will directly interact with, but they are essential to our scene. And so those are effectively what we call cameras, lights, and shadows. But before we get to it, I'm going to also go ahead and start putting together a quick scene with, or rather a quick project. And so that would also hopefully gets us to the feeling in the sense of setting up our scene again. I think it's been a few weeks since we set up our first project together. And so hopefully this will kind of be a quick refresher in terms of setting up the project. So before we get into the lecture and talking about different items, let's go ahead and start putting our project together. And we call this project Light and Camera. So go ahead and open up your Visual Studio. And in the Visual Studio, I'm writing this in Visual Studio 2013. So the setup that I'm going to show is based off of the Visual Studio 2013, but you can use the same steps for Visual Studio 2012. However, do remember when we are encoding and linking our link and header files, make sure that you use the Visual Studio 2012 version if you are using Visual Studio 2012. So we go and create a new project. We are going to make this a console project, a Win32 console project, and we call this Ogre Camera Lights. And we will make this also an empty project. All right. So the first couple of steps that we need to perform is obviously we're going to add a C++ file. So go ahead and click on Add New Item. And we're going to make this a C++ file. And let's call it main file. Doesn't matter what the name is. And next, we are going to go ahead and set up the 4 different properties and dependencies that we need to be able to use to set up to be able to use our project. The 4 dependencies we need to set up are, in terms of source, we need to go into our project property and point to the location where the header files of Ogre are. So we're going to do that. Then we are going to go to the linker properties of our project and also include where the location where the libraries for our Ogre project and our boost are, because Ogre utilizes boost. Third, we are going to show and add the lib files, the library files that we are going to use in the linking process. And fourth, we are going to set our Active Directory to point to the binary directories where the DLL files of our Ogre project are, so that we don't have to copy and bring those DLL files back into our project. So the process is fairly straightforward. All we need to do is just to go and right-click on our Ogre project and go to its properties. And then in the properties section, we will click on the C++ tab, and from there, we will need to add the location where our additional include directories are. And the additional include directories that we need to add are ones for Boost and the ones for Ogre. The process was fairly simple. Click on Edit in the additional libraries, click on New Folder, and here what we're going to do is we are going to add our libraries. Now, if you remember, we have already set up the environment variable for our Ogre home. And what I called it was Ogre home VC12. So this environment variable is actually the location on my hard drive where I have the Ogre files installed. And it was something like in the C drive in the gaming programs or gaming SDKs. And there I had the Ogre folder, and then I had the Ogre 1.9, and so on and so forth. So that's my environment variable where it points to, and it's going to point to Boost. So I'm going to add the Boost libraries or directories there. And then I'm going to also need to add my Ogre home VC12 backslash include backslash Ogre backslash overlay. And also just go ahead and add Ogre home VC12 backslash include. So I need to add basically these three folders to be able to work with the Ogre source. Ogre include, Ogre overlay, and Boost. Alternatively, I could have actually gone and typed in the whole C colon backslash gaming programs backslash and all the location directly. I could have done that, but in order for me to save time and set it up much more efficiently, I created the environment variable Ogre home VC12, where it actually points to the main folder, and then from there I added the include folder, the Boost folder, and the include Ogre overlay folder. And so this sets up my header files. So the header files are set up. Now to test it out, to see if it works, we can click on apply, click on here, and then our main file we could do an include. And then as you see, when you have the include file or the include libraries, then you would get access to the Boost and all these Ogre elements, right? So that's how we can test out and see if our project additional include libraries were added properly. The next step, if you remember, was the linker process. And in the linker process, this is what we need to add. We need to add the libraries where we have Boost and we have the Ogre lib files. So to do that, we do the same thing. We go to properties of our project, and this time we go to the linker properties. And in the general subtab, you will have additional link directories, and click on edit, and then you will be able to just basically do Ogre underscore home underscore VC12 backslash lib backslash debug. Because we want to use our project in the debug mode, we are going to use debug libraries. Ogre home VC12 backslash boost backslash lib. And this sets up the location for where my object files, my library files are. Now that the object files and the libraries files are set, I need to also go to the input section of my Ogre, my project linker, and then add my additional dependencies. So on the additional dependencies, we click on edit, and here we will add our Ogre main underscore d.lib, Ogre overlay underscore d.lib, and ois underscore d.lib. Remember to put the .lib extensions, otherwise Visual Studio would try to find .obj, which basically stands for object files. But we are going to use actually lib files here in Windows. So the static libraries that we are going to have to use as additional dependencies are Ogre main, Ogre overlay, and OIS. And this _d specifies that we are using the debug files, the debug libraries. There are release versions which kind of lack the debug information and setup. So that sets up our additional libraries. And one last step that is left is to go in our debugging tab in our project properties and change our working directory from the project directory itself and change it to the Ogre home bin directory. That's where the DLL files for Ogre are that can be actually then dynamically linked to our project executable files so that we could run our project. So then again, we will use the Ogre home _vc12 environment variable, and we will go from there to the bin and to the debug folder. And this should set our project up. So next, now that we have this set up, we're going to go and start writing a shell for our project and our application class, and then we're going to start adding files and items into it.